Hi, I'm Seamless, and this is the second part of the making of Back, which is covering the sound design portion of the whole deal. This, in this video, we'll talk about essentially how I made each and every one of the synthetic elements, the melodic things. Drums and that will be covered in the next part, which will be about mixing and mastering, which most of the time that just really focuses on the drums and that kind of thing. And it's not really a lot of sound design I went into actually making these because I didn't so much make them as I just sort of formed them. We'll talk about that when we get there, but this video, we'll talk about the basses, the leads, and all that kind of good stuff. Just a reminder that if you would like to have this FLP for yourself, as well as any of the projects for the Wizard Bass EP, you can go to the Fix store and go to the deluxe version of the EP, and you can actually pick it up for yourself. This is the exact project you'll get a hold of, too, which is handy. As well, you can get individual projects if you don't want this, but you want forever or something. Anyway, let's talk about this from the beginning. And that's super loud, which doesn't mean anything for you guys because it's always the same level for you. So this first part, a bunch of stuff's happening. Things like this guy, for example, there was some sound design involved with this, but they're kind of baked into this just for sort of legal reasons. But like this sound, for example, if you take any kind of like really big like explosion-y impact thing and you just like low pass it all the way, you'll get more or less this. You'll want to like compress it up a bit. I believe this one also was, but that's more or less how you do that. You put reverb on it and you get that sound. It's not really a complicated sound. This, you actually, if you look at the visualizer while it was playing, you can kind of see what's happening. Is that it's being filtered up and down, and the original was just that sound, just not filtered, and also distorted, EQ'd, and compressed, and whatever. So there was a lot of things that went onto that, but the sort of the crux of it was that it was just kind of bandpassed. And now the things that I actually did make. This sound, which in the very beginning is actually silent, and it builds up until eventually. Actually, it's still building up. You don't really hear it full until this part here. So this is a kind of a fun sound. It's a little bit uses some of the techniques that I talked about a long time ago when I made a sound called Accidental Monastery. And it has a little bit to do with some of the concepts of physical modeling, which are good times. Other than that, though, it's mostly just super soft. Move, Doritos. However, some cool things are still happening in here other than just being a super saw. I have phase randomness engaged all the way up in this Harmor, and this is actually a big part of what makes it sound kind of a little bit smoother. Other things are happening to make it sound smoother as well, like a lot about what's going on in this guy's articulator. Yeah. So like right now you can see this is the unison pitch is being LFO'd, which is a lot like saying I'm just taking this and moving it up and down over time. So it all undulates between higher unison and lower unison. And the reason why this contributes to the smooth sounding is because even if it goes back down to not having a lot of unison, the pitchiness goes away, but the saw nature of it doesn't really come back. And that's because whilst it was being high in pitch and doing crazy things, it progressed in its phase, and then when it comes back, it's already out there. It's already out of phase completely, so it's not going to come back. This is true for regular unison as well. I have the harmonizer engaged. It's just the basic harmonizer. I'm not doing anything special with it. It has a vaguely kind of like octaved feel to it because it's sort of what it's accentuating. The way the Harmor's harmonizer works is that it doesn't like clone what you're playing. It clones the relevant harmonics above the fundamental. So in this particular instance, when I say it's octaving, it's like it's cloning like the ones and the fives and that kind of thing. You can kind of see that up in the upper here. You can see how some of them are a little bit brighter than they were a minute ago. That's all it does, is that it accentuates particular harmonics over others to emulate what it sounds like with harmonized notes. You can change which harmonics are, which or whatever. You can't really go out of the harmonic series, but when you go high enough above the fundamental, you get more than just the semitones of like a scale. You get a lot more non-musical tones, which are still multiples of the fundamental, but they're so far above the exponential, you know, harmonic list that they're very in between notes. Harmonic randomness. What else has happened here? I don't think anything else really that important. It's being distorted, delay and reverb, and because the burning compression is on, but it's not really doing. It's not like pushing it up or anything. It's really acting as kind of like a saturated limiter. With all that's happening here, there's really nothing else happening inside Harmor. I guess not. So in the actual effects here, like without all the effects, this is what this sounds like. And then up here we have EQ, which is bringing away a lot of lower frequencies. Big reverb. Which you can see had a really big impact on the tone there, and that's because the reverb itself, the wet of the reverb, is about as loud as the dry. Normally the wet isn't as loud as the dry, even close to it, and that would give it like, the ambience, the sort of the ambience of it all. But when the wet is that loud, it starts to clash with it, and then we get a big tonal shift. And also because the reflection sort of size is small, which means we get a bit of that kind of tin canny sort of sound. Although we do have a larger than default decay time, which means that we don't get the sort of transformery sounding thing that people do when they use this on like a dubstep bass. And then we have a filter, which is only used in like the beginning. This is just here to do the automation, that kind of thing. And then tiny EQ, which I think I'm also using as a filter. I forget what I'm doing with this, because this I only do that kind of shape when I am using it as a filter. See, am I automating this? It seems to think I am automating it. I must have used it later. Let's see if that's it. I don't know. Well, there's a filter somewhere, and it uses the filter. I think I might have tried to EQ. Oh, hey, this is being filtered. What's this guy doing? I don't understand my own songs. I like that the highest frequency for the low pass filter is 16,000 hertz. This must be it. Yeah. All right. So it's funny that's not the same thing. The chord, this part is actually the same sound. And this sort of thing is a pretty big staple of this style of like breakbeat kind of groovy tracks from like the early 2000s. And like this is one of these things I mentioned in the arrangement video about how I struggled to 1, 2, 3, 4 megabytes of RAM. That's funny. Struggled to find like a way to make variations that weren't too much, right? To like lose focus or whatever. And it turns out pretty much any variation on any of this is too much, just because this is what the genre is. You could obviously have more or less complicated versions, but about my understanding of what I liked about the genre, this is precisely what this needed to be. And that's fine if nobody else likes it, but this is what I wanted, this whole thing. But like when I was writing it, I didn't know that I wanted it. So like when I made this particular thing, I put it on there, and I put it there just being like, I'll put up this is a placeholder. I'm not really going to use it for later, but like it just stayed there, and that's how it sounds now. And it really completes that moment there. So that's that sound. And in the beginning, we also have this sound. This is present pretty much everywhere else as well. It really is more or less just this the whole time. The only difference being that this part, it plays a chord. This is doing a third harmony, I think. Versus this just being one note. So this guy, I call it the repeater. This looks like it's based on the same chord patch. I say it looks like I'm being all like unserious about like how I made this track, is because this track is super duper old. I wonder if it tells me when I made it. Well, this one actually is, because this isn't actually the source project. This is the one that I configured and organized to be sold to people. But like let's just say that like this bass is in a how to bass, and it's how to bass 79. I have currently put up how to bass 159, so that should tell you how old this track is. So this is why I'm losing the plot and how some of this was made. Anyway, what's going on in the post here? Almost nothing. A high pass filter. So we're using a lot of unison. We're using we messed with it too. We messed with the unison. There's probably a filter here too. Is this being? It is. All right. So there is an LFO on this bandpass filter. It's a really long LFO, so this kind of continues forever. Yeah, so that kind of like acidy thing. This is sort of how you. This is how you do that. Like you have a filter, you filter it, and then you put that filter before distortion. This is rather high pitched. I have a lot of harmonizer. To explain already what sort of the harmonizer does. I had the harmonizer before the filter though. This is before being as old as this is. I haven't found a lot of the tricks that I use these days. One of them being that I put the harmonizer after the filter. And not a single thing happens because of reasons. That's kind of interesting. Oh, because I had to put out the filter too. Derp. Yeah. So there's filter 1 and filter 2. Filter 1 is doing the bandpass, and filter 2, I believe, is automated. And I believe, yeah, so I use it at the beginning. Good times. I had the filter configuration in default, which is to say it's full serial. So filter 1 goes into filter 2, and filter 2 goes out. It needs a bit of sub protection on though, which means that the fundamental tones will kind of survive a little bit of what's happening there. The phase randomness there is also there to kind of contribute to sort of the smoothness of the sound. If you're not getting what the phase randomness does, I'm just sort of give you a naked Harmor to show you what's up. So typically, when you play a sound on Harmor, it creates all these sine waves that add up to equal whatever the sound is, which by default is a saw wave. In the real world, the saw shape actually comes from the fact that all of these harmonics have this. They start with the same phase, but they all oscillate up in polarity. I guess for you guys this way, whatever, they go up, and even though they're different pitches and they oscillate faster, because they go all up, all the phases get added together right up there, and that's where that peak gets formed. That's why it forms there. So the shape and the sharpness of a saw wave is determined by the fact that all the harmonics are starting at the same time. And if you screw with that, you don't get the sharpness anymore. It doesn't matter if the harmonic content is the same. It doesn't matter if the harmonic content is the same. If the phases are different, the shape will be different. So it's still harmonically a saw, but it's a bit sharper, or softer rather. It's no longer sharp. The reason for this is because what this particular kind of randomness does, there's actually two sides to this knob. Running randomness means that all of the sine waves are in phase together, but the start time of all of them is varying together. So while the phase start is random, all 512 harmonics all still start together. And spectral randomness means that all the start times are changing, but they are all different. Every harmonic's start phase is different. Or at least random, which is not to say that maybe a couple of them are coming together. But I've never actually heard the statistical random probability of a little bit of sharpness being retained from the fact that some of the harmonics would inevitably start together enough that you would get some of that. So I'm willing to bet that there's the algorithm in there is keeping them far enough apart that they are never really aligned for any reason. So that's what that does. And a lot of the sound design in this song is based on that, like the bass we showed you earlier. That's like a big part of what makes that sound like that. This one, not so much. Like it still has that randomness, also because of the unison index mapping doing this. And this whole thing is saying, this is, remember how the LFO on the bass was LFOing how, like, this parameter up and down? This graph represents this parameter per band. So this graph here, each of these poles represents 1 octave's worth of harmonics, which if you want to be visualized evenly, in here, each grid section represents 1 harmonic. And then these darkened areas, the dark and light alternating colored areas, represents 1 octave of harmonics. And you can see how when I have all the harmonics visible, the last octave of harmonics has half as many harmonics as there are. That's because each octave of harmonic above the last has twice as many harmonics. So the first octave of harmonics is just 1, is the fundamental tone. And then the next one is 2 harmonics, and then the next one is 4 harmonics, so on and so forth. This particular view is an octave even view, which means that this is still 1 harmonic, but this is the only harmonic that's here. There's nothing actually in the middle. I could have this guy here, and it wouldn't do anything. This guy and this guy has 1 harmonic in the middle. This guy has 4, and so on and so forth. But these still represent the whole harmonic spectrum. And this line is saying that whatever harmonic is in here is going to have this change in the unison's pitch value. The actual sort of value itself is a little bit hard to sort of kind of come to grips with, because all the way at the bottom is all the way off. No matter what value this particular this thing is set at, it's all the way off. So like this center line here represents unchanged, like unchanged level. So if I went to part B, where I apparently tried to do something before, and I guess I never used it, this is what the default looks like. This is to say that all harmonics are currently the value of whatever this parameter is. If I go above it, it's saying that it's above it, and if I go below it, it's saying it's below it. But if I go all the way down, it's all the way off. So this would be like saying there's no unison, at least no unison pitch anyway, on these particular harmonics. And then this goes up. I don't really know how plus more above it goes. It's not. I really don't know what the values are, but this is mostly a by ear thing anyway. You're doing this to kind of to see what sort of the sound it does to the sound, without a lot of I mean, you can infer sort of empirically what's happening, but I'm not really doing that when I'm making stuff like this. So what's happening here is saying that like the lower levels have less unison and the higher levels have a lot of unison. And when you do that kind of thing, they essentially the phase cancellation is different. It's no longer aligned. So this means that we have essentially higher frequency phase cancellation that creates unbelievable smoothness when we have the harmonics up there, which we don't really hear a lot of because the sound is predominantly filtered. And also we have the phase randomness, and we have that going on. We have the harmonizer. We have a lot of things conspiring to create unbalanced phase cancellation. And this is one of the reasons why I believe Harmor is one of the better things out there for the creation of supersaws. Because for the most part, a supersaw's like goodness is more or less related to how much phase uncertainty you can create without going too far in too much pitch difference or too far in unbalanced stereo relationship, which is a lot easier to maintain when the signals are different enough, but the same in their amount of differentness. It's one of the reasons why when you're multi-tracking a guitar, you can just have the same recording of left and right, even if you play it yourself perfectly identically. Just like the variations of chaos theory level stuff will mean that it's different enough that it'll be perfectly balanced on left and right. Versus if you do the stereo delay thing, where you just delay one side or the other, it'll be really big in stereo, but it'll definitively lean on one side or the other, and will make it feel unbalanced. So that's a lot of fun. This is being distorted. I'm using the hill type. I usually use the hill type for when I'm using square things that I want to add a little bit of saw texture to, because it is by its very nature. Hill and flat hat are by their very nature asymmetrical in a certain kind of way. But in this case, I did it because I'm using it's a heavily filtered sound, and just the way that this particular one behaves with lower frequency sounds being distorted, I just liked it better. Delay and reverb, good times. And then that EQ is what we're going to post. And just one time, making sure I'm not going over, missing anything. This is really kind of a basic sound. There's not a lot to this sort of thing. And as you see, I did try to kind of complicate matters by having a layer in there, but and I'm not using that. Good times. Does anything else happen in this track? Well, let's talk about, let's see, like the NLJ sounds, I guess. The scratchy thing that happens is actually happening live.
Are you ready? Bring it back now.
This is 100% the result of gross beat. I wasn't aware that you could do collapse like that, but
Are you ready? Bring it back now.
you see how it goes through twice like that. The way the gross beat works is that it's 4 bars of audio, like audio manipulation, and it does what it does to a recorded signal. So like you couldn't like start the sound here and then have it like still do that perfectly. There's still a bit about that wouldn't really work.
Are you ready? Bring it back.
Now what's kind of interesting is that I just noticed that the gating is over here. Oh wait, all right.
Are you ready?
I don't know why this was selected. Anyway, but like this is actually pretty close to how like real scratching happens. Like if I were to put this on a record, like you would move the platter like this, and then you would hit the crossfader like with a really sharp curve to do this, and this kind of like gating and plus the scratching gets us this. And so like the way that this is working is that like I have the are you ready?
Are you ready?
And this is happening here, but it's also engaging slightly before that actual moment engages. I may have done that just to keep the thing there, but I don't think it's true. I'm pretty sure I put that there to give it something before the right then for it to actually be able to go back on, because it only works when there was audio playing for it to go. It only goes backwards. It can't go forwards. So it's a little unlike a platter in that particular regard. You can go forwards again, but you can only go forward if you've gone that much backwards. It's a little bit weird, but yeah. I don't use gross beat a lot. I could use it more. I was kind of inspired by for this exact moment for when the very beginning actually of the third drop of my track Resolve from a long time ago. If you remember that, I did a little bit of the scratching on the whole thing, on the whole track. At least I think it was the whole track. It was a pretty good time. This drum beat actually did have a little bit of sound designness to it. I didn't actually want a solo drum beat because I have to unsolo this thing. So those kind of weird fills you're hearing in there, the weird choppiness, is actually from gross beat. There was a beat that I was using here, and I put I was filtering it, just basic filter that you're hearing, but I was also using a preset in the love filter called the IEF filter. Where the hell's the love filter? Where are you at? Bam. Is it the sequence? Might have been the EF low pass, which isn't really. Yeah. So EF stands for envelope follower, and essentially what this means is that the filter's motion is being caused by the motion of like the transient levels of the sound. So that kind of whippy sound you're hearing is that filter, and like that just opened up, and I changed the intensity of it over time, so it's doing it really hard, like right there, and then it backed off a bit near the end there. It's still doing it, but not as hard. That's what that sound was. Then I bounced it out and the whole thing together so that I wasn't actually using the original samples anymore because I don't own them and thus can't sell them to you. So that's why I did that. Anything different? Anything at all different happening anywhere? Not really. This track has like not a huge amount of stuff happening. These tracks, like at large, like they're things that inspire this music, is mostly sample-based stuff. Like there's definitely synths, there's definitely things happening, but they're way, way less complicated and way less dense than more modern things. In fact, if you want a fun time, go look up some guy recreated Prodigy's "Smack My Bitch Up," and they actually found the original samples that they manipulated to make the sounds that are in that song, and it was a hefty amount of doing. It's certainly true, but it's still like sample based, and the guy did a more or less perfect recreation of what that song was. So it was very impressive, and it's a good look into sort of how these sort of things were originally done. My approximation of it is just through having samples and just writing my own things and doing whatever, but it's still sparse in comparison to sort of the rest of the modern worlds of anything. Sorry about the sniffles and stuff. I'm still sick. I'm almost done with being sick though, so good luck. Get ready for that to never be a thing again, or at least for another year. Yeah, so the next video will be about the mixing and mastering of this track, which will have some more interesting things about it. However, I want to point out again that this track is super duper old, and a lot of the things that I did in the mixing and mastering are not things that I would actually recommend doing anymore. If only, like, I would recommend only if you're like doing the musical equivalent of a period piece, where like you're engaging in like outdated and like provably bad techniques just to get the sound that people used back then. Like, not that I'm saying that this is in any way what people did in like the early 2000s, mostly because most of this stuff didn't exist as technology back then, so you really couldn't have one way or the other. But I just didn't really have as modern a grasp on what I was doing when I made this track. Anyway, if you have any questions about this, please let me know. Don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, and all that good stuff. And as usual, have a nice day.